Alright, welcome to the video. Let's talk about hot throw. As candle makers, we want to make wicked candles which have excellent hot and cold throws. But it's not as simple as melting some wax, luzzing in a load of fragrance oil, and making ball-bangingly smelly candles. It takes patience, testing, and practice. But I want to help you guys out. So here are 4 things I've been doing to make better smelling candles. Let's get into it. So the first one is wicking. Now, admittedly, it's the hardest part about candle making, choosing a wick that not only creates a big enough melt pool, it gets hot enough to evaporate your fragrance oil, but it's also safe enough to not burn anyone's hands or ignite their homes. It's a fine balance, I'll say. The only way to achieve this is through testing. Generally, if you're not reaching a full melt pool, your candle won't create the desired hot throw, and you'll be left with a sad pity party for one. You want to play around with wicks. Finding the perfect wick for your wax and container is where patience comes in. Different wicks, waxes and fragrances all work differently, but it is worth the pain. Essentially, you want to get a perfect melt pool for the size of your container, otherwise you're not going to get a good smelling candle. Next up, fragrance oil. The first question you need to ask yourself, are you using enough fragrance oil? As generally, the rule I use is 10% for all of my candles, but it may depend on the wax you're using, as some waxes can only hold up to 10% and some can only hold up to 8%, so it's worth checking with your supplier. I recommend just starting with 10% and seeing if you can get a good smelling candle. Some fragrance oils are pretty potent, so you can reduce the amount, but generally 10% is my go-to and it's where I start with. However, not all fragrance oils are made the same. You could get some really rubbish ones. You could simply fall in love with the fragrance itself, but the fragrance oil just doesn't produce a good hot throw no matter what you try. So it's worth just throwing that one away and going back to the drawing board and finding better fragrance oils. There are also specific fragrance oils made for soy wax, as it can be quite tricky to get a scent throw from some soy waxes. So have a look out for them. And yeah, generally it just takes a lot of testing and practice. There are various suppliers I've tried in the past. Some of them have really good fragrance oils, and some of the cheaper ones you have to sort of find the little treasures that work. And like I said, not all fragrance oils are made equally. I recently came across a candle guide on Reddit, and one user had this to say: if you're not using 10% fragrance load, start with that. In the example above, a 6% fragrance load will cover 127.5 square feet. The same size candle with a 10% fragrance load will cover 212.5 square feet. So that's a big difference. If you're already at 10% fragrance load, then you may need a larger candle for your space. If you don't want to use a large candle container, then you need to use multiple candles to fill your space. So that's what you want to instruct your customers to do if you want to fill that room with a lovely fragrance oil. The next step is to add your fragrance oil at the right temperatures. Now, this one is going to upset a lot of candle veterans, and it's probably going to rub people up the wrong way. But I add my fragrance oil a little bit lower than most people. I simply add my oil at 65 degrees. Now, this is proper pro science, but bear with me. Adding it too hot, I find it burns off the scent. Now, I know the science doesn't support this, as we're not getting anywhere near the flash points and it doesn't burn off the scent, but from my subjective experience, I truly believe it, especially with essential oils. So against popular belief and the candle community, I add my oils at a lower temperature and I make sure I stir them thoroughly for 2 minutes with a whisk. As the candle cools, I go back to it periodically and keep stirring until I reach the desired temperature, and then I pour it. So I find just adding it a bit lower, I feel it sort of protects the scent, and just by stirring the crap out of it periodically over the time, I feel like I get a really good scent throw. I've tried it before. I've tried adding fragrance oils at 85 degrees and the candles just didn't come out the same. So add the fragrance a bit lower and just see if it makes a difference for you. Last one, the wax type. The type of wax you use plays a huge role in the scent of your candles. We've got paraffin wax, renowned for its scent throw, but it lacks in other areas. Soy wax, the ever popular wax for candle makers, with many benefits, but it can suck a bit at hot throw. And as many other waxes available, there's loads to go through. It's a tough balance between getting wax that offers great scent throw and perhaps like aesthetic purposes. For me, my candles are transparent glass, and I want them to look great. I don't want the wet spots, I don't want the frosting, I don't need any of that. I need them to look perfectly, but equally I want them to have a great scent throw. So it's trying to find the balance between the waxes and what they offer to what you want to get from it. So the wax I use is a soy coconut blend, and it's got excellent glass adhesion, so they look perfect. The scent throw is pretty good, maybe not the best I've had. C6 was the best scent throw I've ever had, but there were wet spots all over the place and they just absolutely did me in. They might not matter to a lot of people, but they do for me. Play around with different waxes, don't settle on one thing. Keep testing and seeing what works for you. See what kind of values and see what you want your candles to offer in terms of what waxes you try. So yeah, the main message really from this is test, test, test and play around. Don't settle on one thing and just keep trying. And that's it for today's video. They're just some of the tips and some of the things I've learned on my quest to making epic candles with the perfect scent throw and that look sexy as fuck.